Oh, it's such a hot day today. We are going to be starting something a little bit different from this vlog, and I think I might make this a weekly activity, but a number of people have given feedback over the surveys and some other things saying you want more explanations about how and why we do what we do. Combined with the fact that my friend Tim, who runs this whole strategy channel on how to make your YouTube channel better, has always been telling me that we don't make enough videos that help new people. Because our idea is like, well, if you want to understand us, you have to watch all our videos. Well, that's not very helpful for someone that just shows up and they see us like grinding coffee and they're like, what the heck is going on? Who are these people?
Because we have like 500 videos.
Yeah, it's like, what do they believe? And we're like, I don't know, watch all 500 and you'll find out. So this is going to be an exercise in condensing some messages and organizing some of our thoughts in a way that we hope is helpful to you guys. So today's topic is going to be about one of the most important seasons of our life. So the title is 7 Things that we learned from taking a year off of school. A little bit of background, we have done a lot of different kinds of school. We did public school, we did private school, we did homeschool, and then we did like this homeschool, classical education co-op thing. So this isn't just like anti-school, unschool. It's not as simple as that.
We took this year off. It was 2012, 2013. The ages of our kids at the time were 11, 9, 7, 5, and 1. I was like, how many kids do we have?
Probably the most important lesson we learned was actually how to just enjoy our kids. Before we took this year off, we were like always trying to teach them things, and we always felt like the kids were getting in the way of the lessons we were trying to teach them. Like there was a lot of crying around the math table, I remember, and it just felt like our kids were in the way of what we were trying to accomplish.
During this year, one of our friends told us that we've got to like our kids. And that was a really new concept to me. I knew we needed to love our kids.
And teach them.
And teach our kids and do all this stuff. But I never thought about like, I gotta like my kids.
And taking the objective of school away for a little bit, I think gave me more space just to see them for who they really were and not just what I wanted them to do.
Mm-hmm. Learning should be fun.
Which sounds kind of cheesy in a way, and I don't think everything needs to be fun, but it also doesn't need to be hell. And what we had kind of learned was that almost all learning is really just a means to an end. And what we started to see in this time period was that it's actually fun and it's enough to just learn to learn. Like that's a good enough thing. Kids especially, but even adults, we're naturally curious creatures. But when we've like turned this learning thing into just a way to get into another school, to get into this school, so you can get into this school, so you can get this job, so you can get this money, so you can retire, it all becomes terrible.
One of the things I really learned that year was how much I was being motivated to parent and teach my kids out of fear. And taking that year off, I noticed that fear kind of just like started to turn off and was replaced with passion and excitement to teach the kids what I wanted them to know, what I wanted to share with them.
How to value all of our kids.
For that year, we didn't have an agenda that we were just trying to like push and drive through. And I think when you have that agenda, there's bound to be some kids that don't quite fit into that type of learning or environment or whatever you're doing. And so we were able to see our kids as individual people, and that they all had different needs and wants, and they're just different.
Yeah, some kids are actually good at school or good at making money, and some of our kids, they're not. And when we were always focused on school and seeing it as really the main part of their day, it kind of rewarded certain kids and probably made us value them more and we were always kind of harping on other kids, and taking this year off was like, I don't know, it was like a kind of a reset with even how we saw our children.
It's almost like they were able to find their place in our family in a better way. We learned that we're gonna be okay.
That sounds like a really kind of silly thing to say, but I think it was probably the most important one, actually, because leading up to this experiment, we didn't know how long we were gonna do this for. We didn't set off to just take a year off. In fact, I think we took more, but we were thinking we might just quit school altogether.
We're still taking school off.
Yeah, we kind of are. But I had to ask myself this question, what's the worst thing that could happen? I mean, when I'm mountain climbing, I ask that question, it's like, oh, well, we could die. That's realistic. But with taking school off, I remember thinking, what if my kids graduated high school and didn't know how to read?
Or just never graduated high school.
Yeah, what if they couldn't graduate high school? What if they couldn't read, basically?
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, that's like the worst thing, to feel like a failure as a parent. I mean, I was like trying to get our kids to read like at the age of like 5 and then 6 and then multiple languages and then Latin, and there's kind of this like showing off thing. But ultimately I realized, you know what, if they can't read, we would still love them, and God would still love them.
And God would love us.
And God would love us, and we would be okay, like we wouldn't die. And I'm not against reading, but
it was taking this like place of like high importance, like too high, I think, in our lives.
Yeah, it was like reading, God, country. We learned what we valued and not just what others taught us to value. In the school system, you know, there's this high emphasis on reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then maybe you can toss in science and a few other things, but those are really important things. But when we quit and started just asking this question, what do we care about? What would we learn as adults? And what do we want our kids to know? We noticed that there was a lot of other things on the list. For you, it was history and reading.
And I think music too, but someone else did that. But that was like something that you and I both felt passionate about.
Yeah, piano and singing. I started teaching the kids handwriting, entrepreneurial stuff.
I read to the kids every morning from a novel, a book that I cared about, and I wanted to read with them.
Which didn't even feel like learning. That's not like why we did it. That's what's so cool about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
it was like having a cool experience.
Yeah, it was something we valued. Traveling, we've done a lot of that.
When we first started this was Ben's idea, and I remember feeling pretty terrified that something really bad's gonna happen if we do this. But I also was really fed up with living the way that I was living, with being so afraid all the time. And like the way I was treating my kids and stuff, I was like, so I was desperate, and I said, okay, we'll do this thing. Like this sounds crazy, sounds super risky.
We couldn't see any benefits, and we didn't really know why we were
What are
doing
other
it.
people gonna think? But we chose to do it, and I chose to do it. And an analogy that helped me that Ben had was, we're on this treadmill and we're going, and we just have to get off the treadmill. And it takes faith. We just gotta jump. We just gotta jump off.
Because a lot of times you don't know how much energy or bondage you're in until you're free from it. And that's what we found with this. It wasn't until we stopped that we were able to see how much of our mindset this consumed. And it's, you know, this isn't really about school. Like, we find that rest is a lifestyle that we choose, and it's very anti-American. But you see these adults, and I've been this way as an adult, where I couldn't take a day off, and I was always answering the phone, always answering email, like even on vacations and Saturdays and Sundays and whatever. Work was this non-stop grind. But that starts with education, or with school, or kids. It doesn't just start with work. So school becomes this thing where you have to get good grades, you have to make the teachers happy and the parents happy and impress the friends, so that you can get into the next good grade in school, so you can get into the next thing. And it never ends. When
you start going down that path, you're like, where is this even heading? I don't even know like where this treadmill is even going. once you get off the treadmill. I think when you're in it, it's really hard to like, you don't even have time or space to think about that.
This last one is probably the most important and the most complex and the most spiritual. But we learned from taking this year off of school really how to worship, or how to connect worship to learning. Before that, it felt completely separate. Like there was school and work and church, and school was just for school. Like it was just for grades. Like the only, I don't know, you just got good grades. That was like it. Having taken this time off, we started to try and ask this question, what is learning for? Like, why do we have it? What's the point? If we have enough money, or if we're not gonna starve, why would you ever learn anything? And there is a reason, I think. Actually, learning is designed to help us to understand and love and worship God. And that's an amazing thing. And it really sucks, I think, when that gets hijacked to become about this really lesser thing about, you know, trying to prove to our parents or other people that we're good enough, or trying to make a bunch of money.
Trying to prove to ourselves that we're good enough.
Trying to prove to ourselves, yeah, that we're smart, or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
So I think in this time period, we really started to learn that there's a way that we could inspire our kids, and for adults, like learning isn't a kid thing. Like learning, we learned, is an adult thing, and the best way to teach our kids to learn was through us learning, and us worshiping. If that was the only thing that came out of this year, if we sacrificed our kids' education, I think that makes it worth it.
Yeah.
For us.
And we've done that with, like, we learn alongside our kids literally now with Hebrew, and we do music lessons, and so do they. And
this last point, it just comes from this belief for us that if God's not in it, like, what's the point? Like our chief end is to know Him. It's like why we're here on this planet. So if we can't connect things to it, like we should move those things away for things that will help us to know Him. And it was so cool for me to learn, oh, learning can do that. Like that's why it's here. That's actually what math is for. Like that's actually what reading is for. Well guys, that was that. Let us know if that was helpful, or if you have any other recommendations for this format or for topics. Please leave it in the comments, just because I'd love to know if this works for you guys. There was 3 things I was gonna recommend if you want further reading for what's inspired us in these areas. One, it's this book called A Thomas Jefferson Education. I read that right at this time period, and it helped me make some of these decisions. The second is by Tim Keller, and it's called Every Good Endeavor. It's actually a book about work, but I think you'll find when you get into thinking about work, like education, it's like hand in hand. And then the third is this essay by Dorothy Sayers called Why Work? It's like a free PDF that you can look at online. It's really awesome. What are you supposed to say at the end of these?
Get to work.